producer and consumers miss the sustainability of the product. I think they totally miss that element of using wood products versus composites or plastics or steel, things like that. I think they just totally miss that.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Jeff Easterling, President of the Northeastern Lumber Manufacturers Association. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding Podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Jeff, it is a pleasure to meet you. I'm surprised actually our paths have not crossed before.
It's true. We seem to be running in the same circles on occasion.
but just around each other somehow.
Yeah, certainly glad to meet you and be here.
Thanks for your time. Can you please tell me about the Northeastern Lumber Manufacturers Association, commonly referred to NLMA? What do you guys do? How did it get started? And what are the companies that comprise the organization?
Sure, yes. You can tell why we go by NELMA, because that Northeastern Lumber Manufacturers Association is a mouthful, right?
I want to look every time so I don't botch it.
So that's why we're commonly known as NELMA. You'll hear a lot of people say that. But the organization has a pretty rich history starting in 1933 as a result of actually the New Deal from Roosevelt, as they needed an organization to try to set prices of all things back in after the Depression. And so that's how NELMA was started on Madison Avenue in New York City, of all places. And but it morphed after that into really a trade group that represented the Northeastern softwood lumber industry. Softwood being obviously the eastern white pine, the spruce, the balsam fir manufacturers of lumber. So that's its original history. Now we do represent pretty much all of the softwood industry in the Northeast U.S. and the Great Lakes area. So our members would be those manufacturers of softwood lumber and other affiliated wood products that they sell on the market.
Any companies that our listeners might be familiar with?
Sure. You would hear in the Great Lakes, you would probably know of Potlatch Corporation is a very large national. Irving Forest Products in the Northeast, everyone knows the Irving gas stations, right?
Sure. Same company? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, they are very diversified, and lumber is one of their entities that they have some large lumber mills in Maine. And so certainly those two, and then we're made up of a lot of family-owned mills, which makes it very interesting, that have been in families for generations that produce lumber.
Are they like producing commodity dimensional lumber, or are they making more specialty products with the folks who own these smaller mills?
Well, there's two types within the organization. What we call one more of the appearance product, and that's eastern white pine.
Siding.
It could be interior, it's a shiplap, it's a beaded ceiling material, very specialty, mostly interior, but also siding as well. So that's kind of what you would more call a specialty type market. And then the other half of ours, which would be including the potlatch, would be more the commodity, the 2x4, number 2 or stud material for wall and framing construction. So we have both elements, within our organization.
So Eastern Canada is also a huge producer of softwood lumber products. Are they part of your organization?
Well, companies that have locations in Maine some are headquartered in Canada. Uh-huh. So we're very close tied to the Maritimes in particular. And in Quebec, also a couple of the mills that have mills in Maine also have headquarters more so in Canada. So yes.
So how did you become president of NELMA? I mean, were you in the lumber business prior to this?
Luck of the draw. No, actually, yes. I have a degree in wood science and also one in marketing. So I'm probably one of the few that actually has a job in the degree that they got. And that was many years ago. But yes, I started out with the Forest Service in the South, and then prior to NELMA, worked with an organization in headquartered in New Orleans that was promoting southern pine, which is the dominant species down there. And then the job opening came up in with NELMA in 2001, so I've been there 21 years later.
So, what are you guys trying to do? What is the mission of NELMA currently?
Well, we have really diversified in what we offer our members. The original lumber grading and elements with quality control was the origins, where we administer the national grading rule and our own grading rule to those member mills. In other words, we train individuals at these mills to grade based on those rules, and then we come back and make sure that the material they have graded is on grade.
So you're auditing the graders,
absolutely. We spot check what they do and make sure what the consumer's getting should be actually on grade as it is either stamped or sold as. So that was the original mission of the organization, and we still do that. We have since diversified into what's called export wood packaging, which takes an international standard that was developed to try to stop the spread of invasive species globally. And it requires heat treatment of that wood material that's used in wood packaging, and it has to be verified. So that's one of our duties. And marketing. As you know, we are significant regionally in the marketing and promotion for our members' products. Not their specific brand, but more generic based on species.
This is very interesting. So the area, this part of the country has a long history of lumber products, right? And I think it would be safe to say that European settlers came here because of our amazing forests. Is that true?
Very true. And we do have a long history. And I would encourage your audience to take a look on our website, nelma.org, for some history in what's called the King's Broad Arrow, which I'm sure you may have heard of. But what that was the original King of England required a mark placed on all very large trees that would make ship masts. And that was primarily Eastern white pine, and we're talking early 1600s. So, yes, the history of the timber industry in New England is significant. Many think that that subsequent kind of disagreement and pine tree wars, or whatever you want to call them, led to the significant part of actually having the Revolutionary War. The original flag of the colonists had a pine tree in it.
Get out.
So you talk about long history, yes, and the trees played a huge part in it for New England in particular.
And so much of the logging that's been done in recent decades has been for pulp paper production. Is that still going on, and is that part of the NELMA mission too?
No, we don't. We don't have many things to do with the pulp and paper industry. And so the answer would be no. They are less significant, as everyone knows, in New England or the Northeastern, as mills have shut down because of, I guess, foreign competition, what have you. But it's becoming less. But yet it's an important outlet for our member mills for their
waste products, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's still a very important connection to the lumber industry to have that pulp and paper market for that product.
So are the products that your members produce, are they sold mostly in the Northeast? You know, one of the things we like from a green perspective about forest products is they have low embodied energy, and oftentimes they're used close to where they're produced. Is that the case with these products from the Northeast?
Well, yes, and no, because of the popularity of Eastern white pine in particular. you will see that product pretty much east of the Rockies in markets.
California likes our pine.
Well, no, east of the Rockies. So you would see,
Oh, my bad. My geography is terrible this morning. Sorry.
you would see like Texas and Kansas City and places like that. You would be able to buy the product, and everything in between as you go east and south. So and it's a lot due to its popularity. And there's not really when you talk about appearance grade and interior, there's not a lot of competitors until you get west. The Ponderosa pines would service the same market area. So we like to say pretty much east of the Rockies. Now, our spruce and fir industry that makes commodity product, that's a lot of regional. The Great Lakes area, the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, even down to the Carolinas, you will see that product.
Hmm. What are the species we're talking about? You mentioned spruce and fir and white pine. Are there others too?
Well, within that, you will see a stamp on lumber that says SPFS, and that stands for spruce pine fir. It's the eastern spruces, balsam fir. In the Midwest, it's jack pine and red pine, and those four dominate that species grouping, and that's truly the softwood species in the Northeastern Great Lakes.
So, are there forest products that used to be really popular? So, like, I think back to my growing up in the 70s and 80s, and like Pickwick paneling was something that folks had in their basement rec rooms and this kind of stuff. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think it's fair to say that some stuff goes in and out of fashion. What have you seen go out of fashion, and what's hot now?
Well, you're absolutely right, because obviously I'm of that era where I remember the dark basement walls and of wood and kind of cave-like, if you will, and that truly went out of style. But what you see now is a resurgence the last, say, 5 years of appearance grade wood in homes. And it's a little different. It could be an accent wall, it could be the ceiling, which is quite trendy and popular. But you won't often see it with that dark varnish they used to put. Most people like to have it either natural or even some type of a transparent where you can see the knots, white or blue, or so they've gotten into the color. So it's exciting now to see that resurgence in the use of material because most of the trends show where consumers love to be surrounded or partially so by wood.
Is there any thing you can point to that is common throughout the country? I mean, or is it regional?
No, that is actually trending nationally, and it's probably because of what consumers term things as industrial farmhouse. I mean, you'll hear that a lot, and you probably have, and it's like, okay, what is that? But what they're doing is mixing all types of materials, whether it's metal, glass, wood, in that type of structure. But it lends itself for partially exposed wood in many of the rooms. So it's quite interesting nationally how that is transformed. We just did a big consumer research project last year that really confirmed some of those things, and then we heard other shocking things, but that was a national type.
Like what? Tell me. Don't keep me in suspense.
Well, one of the things that we found was the question to them was, where do you find inspiration? And of course, fine home building, right?
I don't mind you plugging the brand, my friend.
I'll throw that plug in there. But actually, what it was, almost 100% of the individuals involved in that consumer research that pointed to Pinterest. That is their major source. And you even had some that said the architects encouraged them to go create a board and show them. And it was a little, so we knew Pinterest obviously was there and Instagram, you can get ideas, but we didn't know how prevalent it was in that decision making process that's truly in the consumer hands, that we had often felt like the architect or the builder, had much more influence. But yeah, it was quite interesting.
Wow, that is really cool. Well, we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor when I ask Jeff, what is up with lumber prices? If you run a home service business like painting, contracting, lawn care, or cleaning, your to-do list is endless. From hiring staff to mountains of paperwork, not to mention doing the actual work that pays the bills. Jobber is a mobile and online app that helps you organize your business and look professional. With Jobber, you can quote jobs, schedule your crew, invoice, and get paid all in one place. Try it free today at getjobber.com/finehomebuilding. All right, Jeff, so what is up with lumber prices?
Well, as a trade group, we can't often talk too much about prices, but I can give a little background of kind of our thoughts on that. And there are several things at play. I don't think a lot of individuals realize, as you mentioned earlier, that lumber truly is a commodity,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sold as such. It's on the Chicago Mercantile Futures Market and various things like that. I don't think individuals realize, but today and last year, it's truly a supply and demand issue right now. Um, the use of wood is just skyrocketed, even during COVID, much more than the mills ever anticipated. Who knew that repair and remodeling was just going to go out the roof? Obviously, in hindsight, we can see why. So when individuals are sitting in their home and they're looking around like, I think I need a bigger room, or I need an escape room, or whatever to get away
Right,
from
or I
work.
need some nickel gap paneling, right?
There you go. I'm going to see that wood all around me because it
Yeah.
makes me feel better about being home. So, in hindsight, we can see now that it really just popped, escalated. But the mills didn't think so. When the start of COVID, they thought that they needed to kind of cut back a little bit because no one was going to be building.
In previous, disruptions, that is what has happened, right? This was a totally different response.
Exactly, exactly. And the other second part of that is the labor shortage. Mills are producing pretty much what they can and selling every bit of it. And it's not to say they would not want to increase, but the labor shortage is truly hitting the lumber industry, like many others, significantly, which is preventing them from further growth. Um, it doesn't help that most mills are located in very rural areas, very small towns. So their total population of employees is small anyway. So that has crippled a lot of the growth that would see more product. I'll put it that way on the market, but it's truly supply and demand, and right now it is just off scale. Now prices did come down last fall for a period of time, and then they ramped back up because things started cooking again. So the one thing, the lumber market is cyclical, so it will move up and down.
So, how much lumber, and I'm talking like commodity lumber, are supplied by the Northeast? My perception was that most of the dimensional lumber that carpenters use comes from British Columbia. Is that true?
Well, the Northeast and the Great Lakes, the amount of production, because we track that, we track how much shipments that our mills make, is somewhere around 1.5 billion board feet. That sounds like a lot, 1.5 billion, but in perspective, you have the Southern pine industry that produces 16 billion.
Mm-hmm.
You have the West that produces another 15, 16 billion. And then you have Canada that is about that same amount too. So in the scheme of things, we're pretty darn small, even though we think we're big, in the total amount product that is produced. So the answer is yes. You would see other regional product coming into the area to fill what the Northeast can't supply.
And is it fair to say that you think, or the producers are at capacity? I mean, do they have additional sawing they can do? Are there more logs out there?
Oh, definitely. The resource is there. Um, the one analogy I like to talk about in Maine in particular, and you may know this, but Maine is the highest percentage of forested state, somewhere around 80, 85%. And that's after what, 400 or 500 years of producing forest products out of that state since the 1600s, and it's still 83% forested. That kind of tells a story in itself in terms of the product that is still available, and of course the amount of production has skyrocketed since 1600s, obviously. So yeah, the answer to your question is yes, absolutely. Not just in the Northeast, but in the South and the West. The South, where the trees grow much, much faster than they do
Yeah.
in our climate. The quick and easy answer is yes. There's plenty of resource.
Have recent supply chain disruptions affected the wood products industry like they have every other? Asked another way, can you guys get the things you need to turn logs into forest products?
Well, I'm sure there is a time gap. For instance, if a mill wants to put in, say, a new planer, which is what makes the lumber smooth, there's some time gaps on that, and so it puts some lag time in modernization or extra capacity, if you will, because of the delays in equipment, manufacturing, and obviously all goes back to even that industry with labor and also with sourcing materials to produce it. Yeah, you're
I'm
absolutely
sure
right.
energy costs have not made it any easier to produce forest products, right? That's got to have a huge impact on those mills.
Well, the interesting thing there, Patrick, is that most of the mills produce a heavy percentage of their own power
Using waste products.
using waste products. Absolutely. So,
That's cool.
so they're a little bit more insulated, perhaps, than some of the other industries that don't have that luxury of being able to produce steam that runs the mill and the drying operations, things like that. So they're certainly blessed with that ability to kind of offset that other industries don't.
Hmm. So are they generating on-site electricity too, or is it? Yeah, really. That's pretty
Yes.
cool. I think you'd agree that forest product manufacturers have a vested interest in forest health. How are your members protecting the forest they rely on for their livelihood?
Well, management, of course, is key, and most of them do. And most of the landowners remember that most of the forested land in the Northeast and South and Midwest is privately owned, which means either individual or lumber company would own the actual land. So management plans are key to making sure there is a long-term either replanting or thinning or regeneration. For example, eastern white pine is a prolific regenerator. If you see a mature eastern white pine tree, you will see about 1,000 little trees under it.
Hmm.
It is extremely prolific, but you have to manage that. You can't just leave them all close together. So, yes, their management plans are in place to make sure that their livelihood is going to be maintained in the future.
So we're just starting to understand how important soil health is to forest ecosystems. Is that on the radar yet of the forest products industry?
Well, on the forestry side, probably yes. I can't really answer that completely because I'm not in that arena in the forestry much. Um, But the understanding of the soil index factor within the area, which is what tells you how healthy that soil is, or is it going to be able to grow trees on it or anything else? That's critical. So I know the forest industry has their forestry departments have a heavy handle on that, of what it needs or what it doesn't need, or things like that. And an awful lot of stuff is left in the woods, you would say, or some of it, for nutrients, for that very reason.
So what about invasive species? You mentioned it briefly before. How are you dealing with invasive species and species migration owing to climate change?
Well, the excuse me, the invasive species we deal with may or may not have anything to do with climate change. It's more of how it is the vector, how it's vectoring into the country.
Uh-huh.
And that's the critical part, is to make sure we stop that shipment of other countries' problems here. And that international standard I mentioned for heat treatment, I think is doing its job. Although we had a lot of what I call gifts from other countries before.
Can you name some of those problem species that have been introduced through largely shipping containers, as I understand it?
Exactly. Emerald ash borer is probably the more commonly known, even though it's a hardwood problem. It will probably decimate the entire ash tree industry. It has spread since its entrance in Detroit. Port of Detroit is where they have discovered or knew it came in. It spread from the upper Midwest all the way into Maine. Really devastating. Then there's a hemlock. Alligator is what they call it here in the Northeast, that's wreaking some havoc. It's not quite the prolific killer, but it attacks hemlock trees.
Which saddens me greatly, because I think they are just absolutely one of the most beautiful softwoods. It is absolutely beautiful tree.
They are absolutely. And, probably 15 years ago, there was something called a Cyrex Wasp that came in the port of Oswego there in New York. It's native to South America. And so the fear was that it was going to really pose a problem for especially the northern New York, northern New England softwoods. And it kind of went away. I think probably the weather helped us out there. But it has popped up again in Maine, I believe, caught in their traps of some of them. So it's kind of rearing its ugly head. Its main host, what it likes, is southern pines. So you had, even 10, 15 years ago, you had states like North Carolina that were even considering banning product being shipped from the Northeast down to North Carolina when it was first discovered. That didn't really happen, thank God. But here it's reared its head again. And it's like, well, where's it going and what it's going to do? So it's almost a constant battle of some of these invasive species that have been here. Asian longhorn beetle in Massachusetts, I'm sure, in New York City was a problem. But the USDA actually quarantined that area and has pretty much eradicated that one. So there's some good news there.
That seems like an impossibly difficult task, is to quarantine. So you just stop all movement of wood products out of that area? Is that what happens?
Yes. Trees mainly. You would pretty much quarantine, and that's what they did in Worcester, Mass, and New York City, which was not a lot of wood product, but they discovered it around Central Park. And it has to do with the nature of what that pest is. Some are much more prolific than others. Asian longhorn beetle is not. It doesn't move fast. It's really ugly too. If you ever look, and it's large. It's large. But it depends on the species. Emerald ash borer has really migrated fast.
Yeah, I don't see many ash trees anymore. All the ones around my parents' house in Western Pennsylvania have died already.
Sad.
It is very sad. And that's an important commercial species, right?
For hardwood, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Jeff. So this is my favorite part of the show. Can you tell me about your own house? Are you harvesting or managing the forest around your property? Making things from your members' mills? What are you doing?
Well, on my little meager 2.5 acres in Maine, it was mostly trails for my kids.
Nice.
So my answer would be probably no, but I did not have any commercial, what I call commercial value timber there, unfortunately. Otherwise, I certainly would have. If it had had, some nice eastern white pine or some spruce on it, and some of my neighbors do have that and have contracted with a logger to supply those to a local mill. So
it can be a pretty big payday, right?
well, especially now,
Right.
it could be.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you like going out into the woods? You were a forestry major, right? Isn't that what you told me?
Wood science.
Wood science. Sorry.
On the manufacturing side.
Uh-huh.
But yes, I love getting out. You better believe it. I'm avid trail hunter to try to find some really nice scenic trails, across the country. And it's not too high elevation or too much difficulty. But yes, absolutely. I recommend everybody get out into the woods.
Do you think that folks who make their living from forest products see trees and forests the way the rest of us do? Do they just see it as dollar signs, or do they see it different ways?
I think it has to do with it. If the company, like, the family-owned companies I'm talking about, are more because it's their land and they've been in the business for generational. You were talking about sometimes 4 to 7 generations. I think they would certainly view it a little different than a corporate, ownership that views it as a crop, which it is. It truly, wood products is truly a crop, just like any other things you could mention vegetable wise or grain or what have you. But I think the two would view it just a little bit different.
What are we missing, folks outside the business, about the forest products business?
Well, it's getting more common, but for years, I think the end user and consumers missed the sustainability of the product. I think they totally missed that element of using wood products versus composites or plastics or steel or things like that. I think they just totally missed that. And the other element is missing the footprint that some of these competing products, I'll put it, create when they come from Southeast Asia or South America or Europe. That footprint can be huge.
With shipping.
Yes, transportation and shipping. I used to hear a lot about, I'll pick on bamboo, how economic or environmentally friendly it was to have bamboo type products made. But what was forgotten, that none of that grows here. That's from Southeast Asia typically. And that transportation carbon footprint way offsets any environmental benefits, but it's marketed as a environmental friendly product. So some of those things I think missing, although not as much anymore. I think the consumer is becoming much more educated.
Jeff, it's been a pleasure meeting you and talking to you. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we go?
Go to our website. It's NELMA.org, NELMA.org, and we have so many resources there, information, a lot of visuals, a lot of, for the consumers, we have a lot of inspirational photos and images and virtual tours of homes to give ideas of where you can use wood. So I would highly encourage it.
There's one thing I have to ask you. So where can carpenters and builders go to learn about wood movement and the technical details associated with using Northeastern forest products?
We have a ton of how-to videos. Everything from beaded ceiling to wainscoting to siding. A ton of how-to videos are on there. And a lot of the information of what what product is used, what grades used, what finish is used. I would that is a good resource.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thanks to Jeff Easterling for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive.
Thanks, Patrick.
Jeff, it was a pleasure, buddy. Thank you.
Absolutely.